My name is Aubrey. I'm 47 years old. I was one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and I'm shunned.
All right, Aubrey. So how'd you get to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses in the first place?
The all-natural way. I was born into it. My parents they went into the religion at a young age, and it was my grandparents that were the progenitors, both sets were the progenitors of our entry into that faith.
So do you know how it came to be that they became those progenitors? Do you know?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. My grandmother, now I come from a very ethnic home. We're very much Italian. And so what religion was playing a heavy role in the house. So it was all Roman Catholic. And my grandmother was upset with the church because they weren't really teaching from the Bible. They were they give everything in Latin, their sermons in Latin, and they don't really, you take the priest's word for things and stuff like that because they are the mediary between you and God or the Pope. So my grandmother was frustrated by this, and she was like, but I want to know what the Bible says. Well, in my mind, in retrospect, I think to myself, well, why don't you just read it then?
Yeah.
The book, lots of words, and put it together. But I think she was looking for someone to kind of help her understand it. And she went to a couple different religions, and they reminded her too much of the Catholics. And so one day the witnesses came by, and as they do, and she started studying with them, and she joined, and then my grandfather joined, and this was back in, oh gosh, my mom, I think she was like 7 or 8 years old, so that would have been in the early 50s. So that's how it all happened. That's how it all became. I do not know how my father's side joined, how far back that goes. I know that my great-grandmother was of the Anointed.
Oh, okay.
So other than that, so I know it goes back with them a little farther.
Sure. It is interesting sometimes just to know how it starts. Sometimes it's someone who's particularly vulnerable. Something bad has recently happened in their lives, and here come Jehovah's Witnesses, and they care at the door, and there's someone who will listen, and they will come meet with you. Maybe you're lonely, or you're here from somewhere else, or whatever the case may be. And sometimes it's that, and sometimes, like you said, people have questions about things. And Jehovah's Witnesses have answers to just about anything. It's an answer. It doesn't mean it's the right answer. Even if that answer is just a thought-stopping technique, like, wait on Jehovah and he'll explain it. But they have a go-to for just about everything. So
just about everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you're born into this. It's all you know as a kid. So what was the worldview that it gave you as a child?
Oh, well, it made me, honestly, like I told you before, I've never spoken of any of this to anyone before, how it actually went, how I walked through my life in this, but it made me sad. It made me profoundly sad, because the main doctrine of their belief system is that the world is coming to an end. And I kept thinking, this is at a very young age. This is at like 5 or 6. And I remember, excuse me, thinking about these kids that I was in school with and how they were all going to die. And it didn't matter. as a matter of fact, I have a friend that I made in the second grade who I am still very close. I live very close to. And she, of course, was not a witness. And I remember thinking this wonderful person it didn't make sense. I spent the entirety of my childhood trying to reconcile this truth with reason. And it was always at odds. I was always at odds with everything. None of it ever made sense to me. And I was like, it shaped, what it did is it gave me a very distorted sense of what being a kid is meant to be. I see children now in my adulthood, and I see them running and playing, and they're just carefree. There's like not not really a worry. They don't, their brains just aren't, they don't work that way. And I remember I played, but I always played alone. And I was afraid to make friends, close friends, and just the one I had from second grade. Because I said, it gave me this detachment because I was like, why, I'm going to lose them. They're going to die. And it wasn't until I was a little older that I started to turn that around on me. And I was like, wait a minute. Oh, my train of thought, where to go? Catch it. It was, and the harder you try and grab it, further it goes. So anyway, I had a very skewed viewpoint, and it created an identity of.
So you said it was an identity of a detachment. From.
Yeah, and I was supposed to, of course, attach to people in the congregation, but I couldn't do that either, because you are taught at a very young age that even those who are faithful may not make it. Mm-hmm. So you spend your life wondering, like, if I make all of this sacrifice, if I do all of these things, there's still no guarantee, because, you don't know the heart. And what does that mean exactly? If I think of something, because they teach that doctrine of, if you sin in your heart, you may as well go ahead and do it, because it's all the same. And I applied all of those things in my life, like, because when you're born into it, that is all you ever know. Mm-hmm. From the moment you exit into the world, the indoctrination begins. And I don't want to ascribe bad motive to anyone, because this is just what people of faith do.
Sure.
And whether it's damaging or destructive or whatever, it's just what they do. So, and they do the best they can with what they know.
They have positive intent. They're trying to save. They're trying to help.
Trying to help. So there's this element of that as well. So it's really complex.
Mm-hmm.
And
confusing, especially to a kid.
Yeah. And to see discrepancies, you start to register these, wait a minute, but I don't feel this way. Mm-hmm. Why don't I feel this way? And then you question your own identity. Even at that young age, I remember thinking to myself, I am different. There's something very different about the way I understand this to be. And I had questions very early on that frustrated my parents no end, because they couldn't answer them. Nobody could answer them. And the elders were not particularly friendly about the questions I asked. So I mean, they weren't bad at it or anything. It was just I think they didn't expect those questions to come from someone that age. You know, someone who's 6 or 7 saying, if Adam and Eve are perfect, why did they sin? How does sin even exist?
Mm-hmm.
If something is made perfect, how does it have a flaw? And they were like, well, perfection. This was the response I got. This is the only one that, and they kind of, I don't know how they came up with this, but they did. It was, perfection is relative because God also gave them free will. So now imagine this little 7-year-old Aubrey is holding his own with this elder, you know, and I'm like, okay. And I'm of course I'm using adult language. I'm sure I don't recall the exact conversation, so I'm sure my language was a little less refined. But I said, but free will doesn't mean imperfection. Free will does not imply a flaw. Where did the flaw come in? And they just said, you know, it was Satan. Satan influenced them. They created. It was Satan who created the evil. And the second those words came out of their mouths, I remember this this part. I remember like it was yesterday. They said it. Something clicked in my brain. And this was over the course of like between I was like 7 and 11, so it was like a 3 or 4 year when I was kind of forming these thoughts, because I've always been very vocal about things that I don't understand or that don't make sense. And I remember it clicked in my head that God created Satan.
Yeah, he did.
So let's take this back. And
so again, the flaw, the imperfection had to have started somewhere, and everything goes back to God.
Goes back to God. Well, isn't that fascinating? So I remember dialing it back, and I was going into my teenage years. Well, what do they call that now? My tween years. And I remember thinking about Satan, and I was like, okay, so Satan went bad because he became jealous of humans. All right, I can buy that. What I can't buy is that God is all good, because you can't create something from nothing. Something there, it has to be there. So we already know from reading the Bible that God is angry and wrathful and will create or will induce all kinds of genocide in the name of whatever, because he promised the lineage to come through Abraham. So I remember that moment of hold the phone. So, because it changes everything.
It does change everything. Yeah.
And you come to this understanding in that moment that God is evil. Oh, well, that's a game changer, isn't it? So I brought this up to my parents. It was not well received.
Oh my gosh. I can imagine you. Little Aubrey goes out to his parents. Hey, Jehovah's Witness dedicated mom and dad. God's evil? What's that about?
Yeah. And my mother, they didn't get angry. My parents are the strangest juxtaposition of people. So they're crazy-ish liberal people. Like, they love everybody. They don't judge people. Well, I'll qualify that one. But generally speaking, they don't judge people. They're good people. My parents, they're messed up. And if my mother heard me say that, she'd be crushed beyond words. But I'm sorry, that's how I feel. is
Well,
the
yeah, they're
religion.
flawed. They are unhealthy. You
They're
can't be in a
unhealthy.
cult and be healthy.
True.
You just can't.
So when I asked them about this, I was like, how can, and it was my mother mostly. My father was an elder. So, and not just, he was one of the elders, like he was one of the presiding overseers, and he would head all kinds of committees. And oh, I don't want to, he, in the hierarchy, he was up there as far as elders. And he was an elder from the time I was born till later in the story.
Okay.
And so I couldn't talk to him. I was not on the same wavelength as my father. So I spoke to my mother, and she did her best, and she tried to curb my thinking. I could, in retrospect, I can see she must have been absolutely mortified
Oh,
that
yeah.
her child was bringing this up. But I couldn't understand how more people weren't bringing this up. This is like fundamental. I'm, in between the ages of 7 and 11 years old, and I'm thinking this up. Why are you thinking this? And I think part of it is because I was raised in it and I didn't know anything else. My brain naturally kind of feels that confine and is like, no, there's a bigger world. There's something else out there. We need to see, experience, and why are we the only ones that believe this? And so I talked to my friend who was from the 2nd grade, and her mother was atheist. And so her mom said she could go to whatever religion she wanted to. She didn't care because she was atheist. And so she would go to all these different churches trying to just learn whatever she could learn. So it was really interesting. So she had a very different perspective.
Yeah.
So I would talk to her and I'm like, does this make sense to you? And she says, well, not from that perspective, but who knows what's out there in the universe? Imagine these little tweens having these conversations. It kind of, she is one of the smartest people I know. She's so intelligent. And we would just have those kinds of conversations. And then of course it would go to music, because music is both of our, I don't know. I hesitate to say drug of choice, but it's definitely,
Sure.
it's definitely our go-to. So we bonded over all that. But she said what I needed to hear, which was, I don't know. There was no need to come to an answer. She says, there's just, so what if God is evil? It makes sense. So, And my mother, of course, oh my God, I thought that was going to be the end of my friendship with my friend.
Oh, so you told your mom.
Oh yeah, of course.
Okay.
Well, because I'm naive. I'm so naive. So I'm thinking to myself, well, Mom, she said this. And I was like, oh, well, we don't need to be friends with people like that. Oh. So of course, I still remained friends with her, but I couldn't hang out with her or anything. Well, we couldn't do that anyway. But as a matter of fact, in all the years I knew her, I never knew where she lived even. So,
Oh, wow.
Because how insular JWs are. They, we don't want any outside influence from the world. And I don't know.
Not at all. It has to be, extra isolating to be that kid who's seeing what you see, that if God created all things and he created good and evil, that, free will, in the Bible, he hardens Pharaoh's heart. Judas, somebody at that table was going to betray Jesus, right? So somebody was created to be the fall guy here. If you're believing prophecy and all these things. So there are people that were destined to do bad things and to not make it, and to and God was interfering or intermingling in some of these things. So when you start seeing this stuff and you're that age and you are in this insular community surrounded by people who all just believe that, God is love and that is it, and everything is great, and just listen to God and it'll go well with you. That has to make you feel like a man on an island or a boy on an island at that age. I mean, that's a lot for a kid to take on.
It was a ton. It was actually really stressful, because I didn't, even from that young age, I belonged to nothing. And I knew that I didn't understand things. I certainly didn't understand the complexities of the socioeconomic religio, community and the implications of what I was thinking. I simply was having these thoughts and these recognition, or these not recognition, just understanding. What was that?
Realizations,
that's the word. I was just having these realizations that, oh my goodness, something's not right here. Something stinks in Denmark. And it shaped the rest of my life. I mean, it really did, because I would sit in the meetings and I would, instead of listening to them, I picked apart everything they said. And I was like, but is that real? And I've always been a thinker, always been. My brain never turns off. I have to, even to go to sleep at night, I have to leave the TV on with something really innocuous that I've seen a million times. So it's often I watch The Golden Girls or a British comedy I've seen 1,000 times, so that I can shut my brain off, because it just goes, and it always has been that way. And I think of things and I mull them over, and I try to parse out into all of these directions, like all the ends. So if I take it here, where does this go? Okay, what about here? And you've got all of these little fractals going on, and then you create this kind of mosaic of decisions, ideologies, and endpoints. And none of them ended well. But I didn't understand that at the time. I was just a little kid. So, from the time I was able to read, and of course my father being a prestigious elder, and my brothers, who are a little bit older, well, 5 and 6 years older than I am. So by the time I was this age, they were already into their teenage years, because they were born really close to each other. And I think they're only like 14 months apart, or 16. Yeah. So their ages, they're only a year apart in age. They started assigning me parts in to read the Bible and give a talk, a little 5-minute blip. I cannot even begin to tell you how traumatizing that was. I'm a very sensitive person. I have a lot of emotional depth, and I take things very personally. I just do. Something I've worked on for a long time, so that I'm not quite so, okay, they didn't mean it like that. So you can imagine the glory of going up in front of and I am not a public speaker. I detest public speaking. I've never gotten used to it. I kept getting told, oh, over the years, you'll do it more and more, and then it'll go. Never went away. And there's a funny little, later I was told it was because I never believed.
And of course, there's always, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
So because I never believed, I never took it to heart.
As if the people who do believe aren't nervous.
Right.
They're all nervous.
Right.
Some are throwing up in the bathroom before they go out there and do their talk, or some of the adults are drinking or getting high in order to get up on the stage.
True. Well, and at that time, you don't think about that. You're not even aware of it, even though your own father is doing it. You don't perceive it. So, I'd get up on stage, my vision would narrow, I'd feel like I was going to pass out, I would get through the part, and then in front of the entire congregation, the elder goes up there and critiques my talk. Oh, really? And that was something that I just had a great deal of disdain for. And it wasn't a pride thing. It was a, who do you think you are? I'm a little kid, and you're telling me that I need to work on word whiskers and, saying too much and all this stuff, and then telling the entirety of the congregation about my flaws. Thanks.
It's a weird dynamic. It's definitely a very strange dynamic.
Well, in retrospect, I think of it, and I think it's a way of controlling from a very young age, getting you used to that conditioning, so that when other things come up, you learn that the elders are like this. Yeah, well, I had quite the conversation with the elders last September when my father passed away. So that got a little pointed, shall we say. I don't raise my voice or get aggressive or anything, but I don't have a problem speaking my mind.
Sure.
And so I did. But I digress. So here we are. Little kid giving talks, terrified, hated it. And then they would want to use me in these little parts, little skits that they used to do in the ministry school. Let's pretend that we're going door to door and we can have this hokey, whatever experience going on stage.
How dare you call it hokey?
Oh my God.
The parts where, they always take the literature of the magazine or whatever, and it always works out in the end,
And there's never a get off my porch
yes.
moment. Because that would be helpful.
Yeah.
For them, it would be really helpful. Yeah. It's like, how do
make it real?
Situations? Yeah, well, you turn around and you walk away. Or better still, don't do it in the first place.
Yeah.
Because from the day I was born, I hated the field ministry. I hated it. I wouldn't talk at doors. And
of course, if you won't talk in front of the brothers and sisters, you're not going to want to talk to a bunch of strangers at their doors either.
No. And I've always been a very, very intense introvert. I'm not someone, I don't even like being around people, a lot of people. It's very taxing. And so, and maybe that's why I ended up thinking as much, that maybe that's where all that comes from, is because I'm always bouncing ideas and thoughts off of my insides, my core, instead of like looking extraneous for my data. It's always coming from inside me.
Everything you said earlier resonated with me. I have ADHD. My brain never shuts up. It's very hard to turn off. It goes in all the different directions, like you said, like a fractal or something, and you know, all the different data points, and examines things. And emotional dysregulation can be a part of that as well. So I understand, all of these things. It's the introversion could even be because conversations are hard because your brain can go in so many different ways, and
while you have a conversation, exhausting. Your brain is going in.
Oh yeah, and it's exhausting.
Because when I'm talking to someone, and this is no exaggeration, and I'm sure you'll be able to relate to this, because I too, like I said, I have ADHD also. I see when I pause like that, it's because my brain's like,
you're getting distracted by your own thoughts.
Yes. Yeah. And you're taking it down this other path, and you're like, well, what if I go over here? This might be a better talking point. So, when I'm having a conversation with someone just one-on-one, it never ceases to amaze me just how much I can tune someone out without meaning to. And it's not trying to be rude, or it's not because I don't care about the what they have to say, because I do. It's that I'm already parsing information that they have said seconds before, and figuring out, like, oh, what does it mean? Are they meaning this? Are they meaning this? Does it go over here? Do I need to be worried? So some of that element comes from a lack of trust in which later in the story, previews of coming attractions, plays out much to my detriment because it becomes a paralytic after a while and you don't know what to do.
Sure.
And so, to bring an extra layer of abstract to this whole thing, during this time, I had, I don't know if you remember the youth book, the red one.
Yes, that was the precursor to Young People Ask.
Young People Ask, yes. That was the one that said masturbation will make you gay.
Oh, God.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Please, evidence. I would love to see your scientific evidence, but that's a whole other story. So I remember reading that book, and I remember they talked about homosexuality, and they talked about all these things. I was not able to connect. I don't know why. It's so weird to me. I was able to connect that God was evil, but I couldn't put together my own feelings with this context. So I remember reading about homosexuality and about Sodom and Gomorrah and all of these, and how was this kind of a big deal? This whole gay thing was kind of a big deal. And trying to apply that to myself took a while, but because I didn't understand who I was. I was so wrapped up in all of these other things. The fact that I had a crush on a little boy in kindergarten was like, okay, so I had a little crush on a boy in kindergarten. His name was Dan. I remember, I can still see his face. And I never put it together, ever. I mean, not until it was a disastrous night when I put those two things together. But I remember I had a part in a meeting, and it had to do with gay people and how to react to people who are like that and stuff like that. Oh. And I was all on board. Like, I was like, oh yeah, you should, gay is bad. It says here, right, blah, 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 blah. And I was all on board with it. I had no idea. I was just completely obtuse to the whole thing. And then, as I got older, I started to realize certain things about myself were different than other people. And that they were very, very different to other people. Like, I never had a girlfriend. And I had a great appreciation for the male form. And I didn't know what that was. Well, one night I was, and remember that throughout all of this, I'm being indoctrinated. I'm giving talks. I'm doing this field ministry thing. I'm very involved with the religion. My parents are like hardcore JWs. We do the studying, and we read the Bible every day. And every morning before we'd go to school, we would do the little examining from the scriptures.
Yep, your daily
little
text
thing with the blurb. And we would pray, and we would have this whole thing. Well, I couldn't even do public prayer. That was not happening. So nothing public. So if it was giving talks, it was horrifying. If it was, I would absolutely adamantly refuse. And this was after I got baptized. Adamantly refused.
Hit that. I want to hit the whole baptism part and see what that was for you.
Oh my! Besides an entirely catastrophic experience, it was bad. But yeah, we'll get right. I'll get right there. So I was going through all of that, and so I had this whole part of me that was this Jehovah's Witness that was in direct conflict with my actual identity. And I didn't understand. I was too young to understand what was happening to me. And it didn't take long for things to go really south in my emotional world. And I started to really, when I got to about 12, 13, I started to really take an emotional decline. My family, there was a big hullabaloo in my family. And so my parents left. I was very close to my grandparents, my mom's side, and super close. And there was some hostility that was going on, and it fractured. And my parents ended up moving to southern Idaho. So I was living in a very liberal, California city, and here we are, And then they moved to this podunk southern Idaho town that was all agriculture, but not like California agriculture. It was Idaho agriculture. So all of a sudden we were these very narrow minds. I was away from my element. I didn't have my grandparents next door they were around the corner, but it was really close. To buffer anything, it became just even more isolating. And I felt so lost. I didn't know what I was going to do. And so I started getting depressed, and I started having what I now recognize as anxiety. Mm-hmm. And so I turned to music. Music became very much my crutch, and also my Achilles heel, especially when my parents found some of my music, and it was less than theocratic, shall we say.
What were you listening to? What was the kind of music at the time that was vibing with who you were?
I'm an old goth punk rocker guy. So I was listening to Susie and the Banshees and Concrete Blonde and things like that. And what I didn't realize is that the lyrics to some of the songs, and I understood what they meant, but I kind of jived with them. So things that didn't make sense to me, I would hear other people repeating in their lyrics. And there's this one song that Concrete Blonde does. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but it's called Tomorrow Wendy. And there's this little segment where she's talking about she doesn't understand why God came down to earth. And she says he got his ass kicked and we sent him packing. So we don't know what he thought he was accomplishing by doing that. And my mother heard this. And that was a conversation. So my very first, so this is perfect. So in 1983, I got my first vinyl record, which was Cyndi Lauper's She's So Unusual. Set the stage for the rest of my life, I'm telling you. But I was 9 years old, and my mother took a Sharpie, and on the record, the record sleeve, she wrote the word bad and drew a line through Shebop, because it's, of course, about masturbation. And she was like, you cannot listen to this. I will take a key to the record, that little thing on the record, so you can't hear that song. And that's bad. That's really bad. And then there was another song about lesbians on that called When You Were Mine. And she drew a line through that one too. She says, you can't listen to those. You can listen to the rest of the album, but you can't listen to those. So that was, censor. And I never understood that. I'm like, it's a song. Who cares what it's about?
I bet it made you wonder what those songs were too.
Right. And I got to tell you, I thought Shebop was a pretty spectacular song at the time. It's a little dated now, but I loved it. So that set the tone, for the whole music thing. So, and then I started listening to bands like Dead Can Dance. I don't know if you know who they are. Well, I had a whole lot of explaining to do about that. Well, the dead can't dance. What's this? What kind of spiritism is this? Oh my goodness. So I had to explain to them. I actually had to research this. Now, remember, we're talking about 1988, 89. We don't have the internet. So finding information is a little tricky, but I found somehow, I don't even know how I found it, to be honest, because, magazine article, that's what it was. I found a magazine article where they said that their name is Dead Can Dance because they take inanimate objects like drums and guitars and things, and they play them and they bring them to life. So it was a euphemism, or not euphemism. Yeah, well, I guess that works too. For playing an instrument.
Sure.
Oh, so they were okay with that then. They were like, okay. But other people in the church saw that CD, because I would listen to it at my dad's stereo. He had one of those 80s rack systems, those huge things. I'd plug in and I would plug in my headphones and I would just be gone for hours. And someone who was visiting, they were going to Pioneer School, and she was staying with my parents, and she saw the record Dead Can Dance, and she flipped. So I got called in front of the elders for listening to Dead Can Dance. And I explained to them the same thing. I said, there's no spiritism, and the whole time I felt really annoyed that I was having to explain the art that I was experiencing, that I was enjoying. And I said, well, I'm not going to listen to something that's satanic. But then as soon as I said the words, I thought to myself, but this world is satanic. So everything is satanic. Right? So how do you avoid it? Well, I'm not giving up music. Sorry. And I'm not going to spend the rest of my life listening to Judy Collins. So, although I love Judy Collins, but and so it kind of, all of these elements come together, and it just creates this general angst. You're angry. And of course, then there's my father. And my father he got addicted to painkillers. So before I was born, he got addicted to painkillers. And then in the years leading up, it became very pronounced. And it became like he was taking it toward the end of that element. He was taking like 350 hydrocodones in 2 weeks.
Whoa.
So yeah, he was a drug addict. And I don't blame him for that. I really think it's important that I say that, because it wasn't really his fault. He had fibromyalgia, and so he had pain, but they didn't know how to treat it very well back in the day. So he suffered, and
thus painkillers. They gave him painkillers.
They gave him painkillers, and he got hooked. I don't believe that it was a malicious kind. Some people use drugs but it became malicious. So it didn't start off that way. So I have mixed feelings about his addiction. On one hand, I don't blame him for it. And on the other, I do, because he wouldn't stop. But that's the nature of addiction.
As I say, that's what it is too.
Yeah. So how, processing all of this. So with all of this stuff that I'm going through on top of it, my father's a drug addict. So there's all this hypocrisy going on, because he's still this.
So he was still an elder.
Oh, yeah. High-ranking elder. But my mother is starting to deteriorate. Her emotional state is getting to a point where she's losing her sensibilities. She's becoming incredibly anxious. Her codependency was going through the roof, and her depression was really bad. And she became quite volatile. And and bless her, I have nothing but sympathy from my mother. She really went through a lot. She took care of my dad for 40 years, and they were married 54 years when he passed, and she took care of him most of that. So I kind of give her a bit of a pass, but she does have responsibility in some of the things that she participated in. So I don't give her a pass for that. But when it comes to these things, I know that she just did the best she could. So she was trying to balance.
Such is the nature of all of this stuff. So, on one hand, your mom probably participated in things that hurt you. And so you have to hold those feelings. But on the other side, your mom is also just a flawed human being who, you know, has her own vulnerabilities and hasn't likely gotten help for those things. And so those things presented in her life and took her down as well. Nobody wins in those situations. Both individuals, you know, hurt people. She's hurt, and now she's hurting you, and you know, prolonging or probably even enabling some of your dad's behaviors. But that's such is the cycle of all of that. It's part of being a human, sadly, and especially if we're hurting and we haven't gotten any real help.
It's true. It's true. And she really did the best I think she could with what she had. But I do hold her to accounts for certain elements that she did. And I'm not, it's such a weird thing, but it is quite possible to do, to have sympathy and have anger at someone for the same thing. Because
it takes a lot of strength to do that.
It's just, you have to recognize what it is. And you have to recognize that this is the human condition. And it took me a long time to get there, but I did. And even though she chooses not to be in my life, and at this point, I can't allow myself to proceed with, you know, pursuing a life with her in it. I've had to cut that off, but we'll get to that. So my father,
your dad.
Yes. So my dad, you know, again, everything is conflict in my life. So I'm trying to reconcile my belief system with my identity, with what I'm witnessing around me from my father, who was completely detached. He was this magnanimous person in, you know, very bigger, larger than life person on stage, and all kinds of compassion and empathy. And we would walk home. As soon as we go through the front door, he turns off, and he's just detached. And you know, where's my Demerol? Where's my Darvocet? Where's my, you know, my fix, kind of thing. And I thought that's what people's lives were like. I had no idea. I mean, my life had always been like that with him. So I never really had a strong relationship with my dad. I had a very resentful relationship with my father because of his absence and his, just his absence. He wasn't abusive in those terms. You know, he didn't beat me or, you know, starve me or anything like that, but he was neglectful emotionally. He was just absolutely gone. He wasn't there. And he was not the easiest person to talk to. He was very judgy. My mother was not. My father was. My father has no filter, and he would speak his mind. He would tell people, for example, we would be having dinners and they'd be talking, why the subject of disciplining your children ever comes up in dinner conversation with witnesses, I don't understand it, but whatever. But he used to tell people, and this was true, he would tell people that my two brothers, he would have to take the board to them to get them to get in line. But he said, but Aubrey, I can crush Aubrey with a word. Now, why would you say something like that with any amount of pride? And it took me a long time to wrap my brain around that. And it was true. I'm, like I said before, I'm a very sensitive person. But why you would want to crush your child? You know, discipline, sure. You know, I was a kid.
Because Jehovah's Witnesses think that control is love.
You might be onto something there. So, his fall from grace was spectacular. My mother had spoken to the elders because his addiction, he was I can't, he was going to ERs and he was drug shopping and stuff. And he was getting, like I said, he was getting Demerol shots and Darvocet shots, and he was getting, well, fentanyl came later, but he was getting OxyContin by the jug full and stuff like that. As a matter of fact, he would turn down hydrocodone. He says, because hydros, they weren't strong enough. They didn't work for him. Well, with that tolerance, you know, he needed ketamine. Are you kidding? But at any rate, so the time came that my mother reached a breaking point, and she was suicidal, and there was some real issues. And, you know, my brothers are much older than I am. So they were like, had a different perspective. Like, they were older, their brains were more mature. I was like this, I was this always an outcast kind of, you know, because I was younger than they were by a substantial amount. And so I was kind of alone all the time. And they would go out with their friends, and who wants to bring their little brother, you know, kind of thing. And so it was just very, again, more isolation. So, and then it got to a point that I didn't even have my mother, because the stress of my dad's addiction and my brother's antics, because my brothers were something special. My middle brother is a pathological liar, and my oldest brother is Peter Pan. So he doesn't ever want to grow up. And she used to just scream and yell throughout the house. Anyway, she reached a breaking point, and she disappeared. And I think it was like 2 days went by, and I found out much later that she had been literally on the edge of a bridge, pondering whether she was going to just take a leap. And that, I can't tell you what that does to you as a kid. I mean, at the time, I think I was 13 at the time, 13 or 14. It really messes with you, because you live, and this all happens, the reason I'm kind of backtracking a little bit is because it all is going to come together into this moment of abject horror, for me anyway. There's always this element in the witnesses of loss, of your consequence being loss of family, loss of your identity, loss of, you know, everything you know, with being shunned. And so you don't want to step a toe out of line, because, you know, that's what you are faced with. So my mother, in that situation, and she went to the elders instead of, which I'm very grateful for. And they told her she was not being a good wife. They sided with my father until she brought up the drugs. Then it became the congregation against my father.
Mm.
And so they met with my dad. He was never reproved. He was never disfellowshipped. He was never anything. But he went into rehab. They sent him to rehab. And they removed him. And they did so like really maliciously. So they announced he's no longer an elder. And then they told him he would never be an elder again. And they told him that he was, and they blackballed the family. They said that I was difficult. I had a bad attitude. And my middle brother went to Bethel after all this. So he wasn't even there. He was in New York. And because he was the pathological liar was the Bethelite. And I thought, well, that's fitting. Now I think that. And he was a regular pioneer, and he used to do, you know, he was all holier than thou. He was the most Oh, what a piece of work. Anyway, and then my oldest brother, he was he was your standard issue late 80s butt rocker. Like, he loved heavy metal, he loved Dokken and Twisted Sister and stuff like that. And so that was that mindset of, that was him. And then there was me, who they didn't know what to do with. So,
well, you and your questions and stuff.
oh, well, and the questions didn't end. That was
yeah. You're such a horrible person because your brain works and you're asking questions.
So the questions continued and the rebuttals continued. And so with all of this going on, rehab, my mother leaving and then coming back. And then when my dad was in rehab, she left again and she was gone for like a week. I'm 13 years old. How do I get to school?
Oh, wait, you're saying when she left, she just left all of you all?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So your oldest brother, I guess, was in charge or something?
Oh, yeah. Who was emotionally younger than I was at the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. So
at the time, he was 19. So when I was 13, he was 19. And he still was living at home. My middle brother had already gone to Bethel, or was right before he went to Bethel. So he was still around, but he would have been 18.
Wow.
So, and there was me. So I walked to school and I walked home, and I didn't tell anybody anything. Everything just created this extra layer of introversion. And I cut everyone off because it was so emotionally destructive to be available. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. So I stopped. I stopped commenting at meetings. I stopped giving the talks. I asked to be taken off of the ministry school. I couldn't. It was too much. And so they, of course, took that as being, you're falling out of the truth, which I find that whole concept of the truth, I find that so absolutely offensive that it's hard for me to even say it. Like, there are certain words that they use in their religion that I have difficulty using because I find it viscerally offensive. And that's just because of how I relate to things. And
Sure.
So at any rate, so I withdrew from all of that. And then came the magical moment with all of this chaos. And I'll never forget, I was listening to one of my favorite bands at the time, Slowdive. And I had this really nice music or headphones and I was listening to the track. It was called Eric's Song. And it's an instrumental piece. It makes you feel like you're on the ocean. It's just beautiful. Anyway, it hit me. A tidal wave, total tsunami of I'm gay and everything that meant and everything I was dealing with in that moment. I was 13 when that happened, and it just boom like that. And I think the next day I stopped wearing color. I only wore black from that moment on, until I was older, much older. And then I grew back into colors. But that was the moment that all of the color washed out of my life. There was nothing left. There was no hope. I was so depressed, and I think I kind of traumatized myself. If that's possible.
Oh, that's absolutely possible. I mean, yeah, we're gaslit our whole lives, so we sometimes internalize and then turn things inward. And when you're told you're given certain messages, you can absolutely take those on and then basically attack yourself with those same messages.
Yeah. So in a way, it's kind of like an autoimmune response. Yeah. And a really large part of myself died. It's the only way I can explain it. It just died. And it made me withdraw to a point that I used to wear a pin to the meetings, a little lapel pin that said, "I hate everyone." And I used to wear that to the meetings.
What?
Oh,
you
yeah.
had a lapel pin that you would wear like on the outside where people could see it?
Uh-huh.
Wow.
And it said, "I hate everyone." And they were like, "Well, why are you wearing that? You know, that's not the right mental state." And at that point, I was not the person you wanted to mess with. I was like 14 years old, but I've always been very tall. So by the time I was 14, I was about 6 feet. So I was big kid. And I just told him to go away. I said, "I didn't ask for your opinion. You don't know my life. You don't know who I am. Go away." I didn't even expound. I just said, I didn't ask for that. So buzz off. And I used to wear this, it was a trench coat. It was this drab green army surplus trench coat. And I would wear it completely buttoned up. I was closed off from everything. And that's what I wore to the meeting, that I would sit in the audience with it all buttoned up next to my mother. And that's how I went to the meetings. And I withdrew into my music and the arts and the things and of course, school was incredibly difficult. I did not do well academically. I just had too much going on. My father, of course, he was clean for about 10 seconds. He got out of rehab and went straight back into using. And my mother was just spiraling further. I mean, it was just chaos. It was absolute chaos. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I missed the 5-year-old and the babysitter. Oh, so go back. I'm sorry,
Okay.
I got to go back a little bit. So when I was 5 years old, I was molested by my babysitter, and on several occasions. And I found out later, and she was a witness, and I found out later that her father had been molesting her and her sisters. And I don't remember what happened with him. But that kind of shifted my thinking as well. So there's all these reasons, these components, and everything is kind of coming to the fore. I hadn't even thought about that for, I don't even know how long. So during this time period, all of that started coming back. And there was some other sexual abuse that occurred, we'll just leave it at that. And during around those years, between 5 and 10, and that at 10 is when it kind of all started that part of it started to wane. And the weird thing is I had no idea. This plays into the element of my ignorance and my naivety, is I didn't even know that there was anything wrong with what was happening. Sure. It didn't feel right. Like, it didn't feel normal. It felt kind of unnatural, but it was like, okay, well, but this is what's happening. So, okay. So later on, now we're back, there's all of this processing happening, and I don't understand any of it. And I think to myself, well, if you don't do something about all of this, you're going to lose everybody. Well, to be fair, I really didn't have much to begin with. So, whatever. But there was a little something is still better than nothing, right? Well, when you're 13 anyway.
Well, sure. It seems that way.
Yeah. So I started getting more and more numb. And so I took to some self-harm behaviors. I would cut myself. I would push needles through my arm and leave them there for days, things like that. And it was, I think I did it because I was so numb, emotionally just an iceberg. It was the only thing that I could do that made me feel anything. And the only other thing that made me feel was music. But music was so intense that I had to be careful because it would take me down to really dark places. I did, I was
Okay. I could see that. Yeah.
I was an old goth kid. So, I listening to this music that is very, Bauhausy and stuff. And it does not take you to places of shimmering warm and bright, it's it feeds that. So that negativity was just everywhere. So I woke up in it, I went to bed in it, I swam in it, and there was no escaping it. So I didn't know what to do. And then on top of that, I was dealing with my orientation because I finally realized what I was. And the religion was not supportive of me at all where I was. They didn't know who I was. They didn't understand what they were dealing with. And so they didn't even bother to try. They just ignored me. And it's something I still struggle with is today, is it made me feel invisible. And even now at 47, I struggle with that perception of, does anybody even really, are they really interested in me? Is there, do they see me? Or am I just a spoke in the wheel kind of thing? It follows you forever. I don't know that I'll ever feel visible. I don't know that I'll ever want to be visible, per se. I think there probably is a part of me that does, but it's a weird feeling.
You were just around the wrong people.
You do? Yeah, you think? Oh my God. Yes.
Jehovah's Witnesses are a very narcissistic religion or cult, and you're around people who they can't mirror you. They're in love with their own reflection. They don't see you. They can't feel you. It's the old Greek myth of Narcissus, and he's looking into the reflecting pool, and he's so in love with his own reflection that that's all he cares about. He can't pull away from it. And that is, when you're around so many people who are hurting and who are in this narcissistic cult, you're just around a bunch of people who, if you don't look like them, think like them, act like them, you don't exist to them at all. And so most of us grow up with at least one parent, if not two, who can't really see us or feel us or understand us. We grow up surrounded by people at the Kingdom Hall who, again, if we're the only way they can see us is if we are the epitome of what they want to see. And if we are not, then we just cease to exist. And I'm so sorry that has stuck, because there are wonderful people out here who want to see you and who want to get to know you, I'm sure, but we never had a chance growing up in that environment to ever be. And unfortunately, the few times we are seen is when you ask the wrong question and then you're in trouble. So you only get a negative response when you are finally seen in some way, because it's just them trying to, again, get you back under control, get you to look back like they look, or feel like they feel, think like they think. They can't give you any healthy, psychological mirroring in any way. Allow me to break in here for a second. This channel is made possible by you, the listener. If you appreciate what we're doing here, please consider supporting at patreon.com/shunned, or leave a review on iTunes or other platforms. Like and subscribe. All those things help the channel. If you're looking for merch, you can go get some Shunned swag from the shunnedpodcast.com website, or reach out there to be on the show. If you're looking for more ex-Jehovah's Witness content, I'll recommend my first podcast called This JW Life. You can find that on podcast apps as well as YouTube. And if you're feeling stuck in life, struggling to find happiness and community, maybe you're haunted by the past, beating yourself up, unsure of who you are or what you even want out of life now that you've lost this one identity that was given to you by a cult, Reach out through my other sites like exjwhelp.com, that's exjwhelp.com, or storyworkscoaching.com. And let's see about working together to help you find a life that fits you and who you are, maybe for the first time ever. And now, back to our guest.
They really can't. And it's a shame that so many have to learn that at the cost that they do, including myself.
Brutal.
It is brutal, because when you're that alone, the only thing you want to be is dead.
Yes. Oh, yes. Been there.
And I was there.
Mm-hmm.
I looked at that door. I never opened it, because I don't know why, to be honest. I have a very strong sense of self. I know who I am. And being who I am has come with a really, really hefty price tag. But the alternative was unthinkable, which was being someone I'm not. And I just can't do that. So I refused to drink that particular cup of Kool-Aid. So I've been suicidal, but I've never been actively pursuing it. I've never planned it. I've thought about it, like, I just take an accidental turn here and
I had that life for a few years. So
well, we are just getting started. No, I'm kidding. So that's what I was faced with at 13. And then it went downhill from there. So so 13, 14, 15, here we are. And I'm still the same gothy kid. My hair is starting to get long and black. My parents are beside themselves. They don't know what to do with me. They say I'm incredibly secretive. I'm not secretive at all. I tell them exactly how I feel. They just won't see it. And when I was 15, I sat my parents down and I said, I like men. I'm gay. My father's face twisted into some unrecognizable shape. And my mother said, well, you're a perversion of nature. And then became the next stage of my hell, which was, well, we need to fix when my dad's face returned to a normal shape, we need to fix that. And I was like, oh, well, let me explain something to you. I've been like this since I can remember. And what happened in that moment was the deepest rage I have ever felt in the whole of my life. And I will tell you why. It was the arrogant presumption that I had not already tried everything in my power to not be this way. Let me explain that I am telling you I am this way because I have already exhausted absolutely every avenue. Because as we discussed before, those fractals are all going out there. I tried each and every one of those suckers and came to the same end, which was, this is me and this is my identity. Well, it actually gets more complicated in another 10 years. And it's something that I have never said publicly, but I will tell you, because I think it adds a very important element to all of this. And so they were like, hey, we got to fix this. And so there was a lot of prayer. And I was like, well, what do I do? I'm 15. So we go through the prayer process and we go through this whole thing. Well, things aren't changing. So at this point, I'm in the 11th grade. And my parents get angry with the school system. I don't even remember what happened. It was something about an attendance policy and them wanting to take me to a wedding in New Mexico. And it got into this parents versus school thing, and they took me out of school, like took me out of school. And I was in the final quarter. It was just about to start the final quarter of my 11th grade year. And they pulled me out of high school and they never took me back. And so they were supposed to help me get my GED, but they never did that either. There's so much going on with my father's drug abuse and the religion and, my personal life and things that was just chaos. There was no way any of that was going to happen. So I got taken out of school and I started going to work. I worked as a bagger at a grocery store. And that was my first introduction to people, since I was a child, to people that were not of my faith. And not that at this point I was particularly Jehovah's Witness, but I still had the name and I still had the facade. So that's what we went with. And it was during this time that I started getting a little more bold in coming to terms with my identity. And I told a couple of people that I was gay, and then it became common knowledge because, people, they're so trustworthy. And we got some gossip, especially in a small town. And the town only had like 20,000 people or something like that. It was pretty small. So, of course, the congregation instantly, did you know that the Aubrey? And I'm like, I thought gossip was a bad thing. I thought the Bible said gossip was something you're not supposed to be doing, but you guys are like eating it up over here. So whatever. But that's just one of many little hypocrisies that, you've discovered along the way. And I left home. I turned 16 and things at home just became, with my brothers gone, it was just me. And so I became the focal point of everybody's angst. And I became, the more they pushed toward me, the more I withdrew, and until I all but disappeared. And I moved back east. I moved to Indiana with my best friend.
Welcome.
Yeah. You probably know Logansport.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I went to Logansport. I lived there with my friends. I got permission somehow. I don't know how that all happened. I think my parents just were glad to get rid of me, to be honest, to get some distance, because they had no idea what to do with me. I only
you were the person they couldn't control.
Oh my God, no. There was no controlling me at all. And the more you tried, the more you were going to get the finger.
Yeah, as if they were in some way under control, right? Like, they were both out of control themselves. So, I just said that, and then it struck me as like, well, they're not in control. Your dad's, his addiction is out of control. Your mom is going, she has suicidal ideation, and she's acting certain ways. And yeah, there's no control here. They just ripped you out of school for their own reasons, as if that is in control in some way, and then never helped you complete your education. Yeah.
Well, education with them is a whole nother story.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, they don't care. So I had to leave. It was for my own sanity as well that I left. And they were probably very happy to be rid of me for a while. And I did end up going back briefly. But I lived in Logansport and for, about 18 months. And then I had to go back to Idaho. Things weren't going well with my friends. They were all witnesses. It was a witness family that took me with them. And they were aware of what my parents were doing and what they were like. And they were trying to help me. And, but the interesting thing was they never made me go to meetings. They never made me do any of the religious stuff. And I never did. They just wanted, I think what they wanted was for me to heal. But they didn't really know how to facilitate that either. So because they knew I was gay, they knew, and so they were just trying to, I think they were just trying to help in the only way they knew how. So it came a point when I was like, I don't want to live in Logansport. I mean, really, who wants to live in Logansport? But it's even a smaller town in Indiana. So I moved back to my parents' house. I was almost 18. And I started working again over there. And then I was friends with this arcade manager. And she, of course, in summer, you wear t-shirts and things, and she could see the scars on my arms, and some of them being, of course, I always wore, well, most of the time I wore long sleeve, but when you get to play video games in the arcade, you build up, little heat. And so I would roll up my sleeves and stuff and whatnot. And she saw my arm, and she's like, she took me aside. This woman is a saintly creature. Okay. We're no longer friends, unfortunately, but that was because of my own complications. I had nothing to do with her. We'll get to that. So she recognized what was happening, and she intervened, and she was like, what's going on with you? But she didn't do it all at once. It was over the course of months. And she has this very motherly quality to her. And she wasn't that much older than I was. I think I was 17 or 18, and she was like maybe 23, 24. But she was older enough that she was responsible and stuff. And so she started talking to me. And the more we talked, we had a lot in common. And that was when she actually asked me if I was gay. And I said, I don't really want to talk about that. And she said, why? And so I told her it was, my family are all Jehovah's Witness and da-da-da-da-da. And she says, well, I'm not. So it's okay if you are. My sister's gay. And I was like, oh, okay. So I told her. And she gave me a huge hug. She was crying, and she was just like, she says, she said, I can see you're in such a dark place. And you don't need to be there. And so we started hanging out more, and outside of her work.
Someone who actually saw you for you.
Someone who actually saw me for me. Terrifying. So, because you spend so much time cocooning yourself up that nobody can get anywhere near you. And she hit the right access code, I suppose. And there we were. And we used to listen to Enigma together, the first record in 1990. And that was very taboo, for me. Even though I was already listening to the other stuff, there were certain things, Enigma kind of has a spirituality to it. And so I couldn't listen to that around my family. And she had a boyfriend. And so we were just friends. And she used to take me to lunch, and she would say, I would actually tell my parents I was going to the arcade, and I would go to the arcade so that I wasn't lying. I know it was a technicality, but I wasn't lying, because I always hated lying. I thought lying was one of the most repugnant things you could do, and so disrespectful. But there's also a measure of survival that you have to engage, so sometimes you don't tell the full truth.
Sure.
But you live elements of it so that you're not lying per se. So I would go there, and then we'd go to lunch, she and I, and then we would just talk. And it was interesting. That was the first poke into the abscess, shall we say. She would pull some of that negativity out of me and what was happening. And then one day, I don't even remember what happened. I was dyeing my hair. I remember that. I had just finished dyeing my hair, and my mother went on this tirade. And I don't even remember what I did or anything. She said, she asked me what I was doing, and I was like, well, what do you mean, what am I doing? I just dyed my hair. No, I mean with your life. You know, she's like, you have all of these secrets. And I said, what secrets? I told you I was gay when I was 15. What secrets could I possibly have from you? I'm not using drugs. I'm not drinking. Although I did smoke a little bit, but it was more of a naughty thing than a thing. And she went to slap me in the face. And I kind of, I dodged it. And she told me to get the F out of the house. She's not going to have that in her house. I had nowhere to go. I was 18 years old and trying to deal with, I didn't even have a high school diploma, as you know. And so I didn't even know what I was doing. And I didn't have a job. And, oh, yeah, that's right. I didn't have a job. That's right. And so she threw me out. So I went to the arcade. I took what few things I had, fortunately, I had all of my CDs in those binder things. So I put those binders in my backpack, and because I never left anywhere without my music. My music traveled with me. So, and I went to the arcade. And she was there, my friend was there, and I was just a mess. I don't know what to do. And she says, you're coming to stay with me. She says, I'm staying with my sister right now, but she won't mind because she'll know your circumstances and she'll let you stay. So I did. And I went over there. Within a week, the elders were on the phone with me, because let's not forget the JW element in all this. They got on the phone with me and they wanted to know details. Why are you doing this? La, da, 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 da. I said, well, my mother threw me out. She said, I'm keeping secrets. And she doesn't, she says, where are you staying? And I said, I'm staying with a friend of mine. Well, who? I said, well, just a friend, someone you don't even know. Oh, they're not in the religion. They're not in the truth. No, they're not. Oh, and it's a woman. Yes. Oh, well, you can't do that. You can't do that. You have to go back to your parents' house. And this was my exact response. You go back to my parents' house. I'm not going back. And the elder said, well, then you will have one choice or two choices: to be disfellowshipped or disassociate yourself. And I think my response was, you are not making that decision for me. And I will disassociate myself from your petty religion. I was so angry. And I said, you don't have any idea what it's like in my life, and you don't even care. And you're going to sit here in judgment of me. And I went off, and how dare you do that? Even talk to me like you know what's happening. You have been so absent from this entire experience. You don't even care. You just want to keep your precious congregation clean while leaving the filth in it, as long as you can sweep it under the rug. And I wrote a letter. It was 2 sentences. My name is Aubrey, and I no longer wish to be part of the Jehovah's Witnesses. And it was announced on my parents' 26th wedding anniversary. And my parents called me and they said, you are dead to us. They were all in hysterics. And we're never talking to you again. We don't know why you're doing this to us. Of course, it has to be all about them.
Yeah, you're doing this to us. We threw your ass out on the street and didn't care what happened to you, but now you're doing this to us.
Yeah. Well, I think they did it as a reaction, as a reflex kind of thing, because they were frustrated. And I appreciate that. I was not easy to live with. I mean, I get it. I don't have any anger about that per se. I mean,
I'm just saying there's better ways to handle that than.
Well, yeah, but they didn't have those tools.
Yeah.
So and frankly, there's no excuse. I have this propensity to try and excuse my mother because of how much I love her. But love does not cover this. This is unconscionable behavior that you should never do to a child. And no matter how difficult things become, understand that you are at the crux, at the heart of why this reaction is going on. So what did you do? And I think that's probably what made, because she's pretty introspective as well. But I think that probably angered her even further because she was so out of control. So I said, I'm not coming back. That was 1993. And here we are in 2022. And so next year will be 30 years that I have been out of the religion. So I remember that when I left, the trauma that occurred at that point was really severe because I was now experiencing what I had feared the most from when I was 13. And of course, there's always this Armageddon thing looming because that's what they drill into your brain. And so it was like this succession of trauma. It was like, hey, let's compact as much trauma as we can in this little capsule of time. And then, you're going to swallow that pill and, live with that for a while. And I did. And because I was alone, I had no education, I was homeless, and I had no family. I had nothing. I was 18 years old. I was completely naive to the world because of how insular the Jehovah's Witnesses are.
Yeah, you're given no life skills or anything either.
No, it's pray to God. Well, I tried that. That didn't work. And so I was literally a child trying to figure out how I was going to survive. And that was really hard. And things took a little bit of a nosedive, and I ended up homeless. I was living on the street, and because things, how do you process all of that at that age? And with that, the things that you have gone through for the majority of your life, it's just gone from one tragedy and trauma to the next. And then you have the ultimate, which is you're on your own, but not in a natural way. And so after being homeless, I ended up moving.
Can I ask, how long were you homeless?
I have to think on that. The first time I was homeless, it was not long. I think it was about 2 weeks. And then, but it was 2 weeks in winter, and it was really cold. But then I managed to find a place with a friend that I had made. Where was I? Of course. That was with the hippies. Yeah. So, yeah. So there was this coffee shop, and the owner of the coffee shop was a gothy lady, and she was really amazing. And her barista was this wonderful hippie woman. who I'm friends with to this day. And she said she had, she was, this is so funny. She's a Catholic that was also a shaman. And she wanted me to come live with her, her husband, and her 6 children in this farmhouse that was in the middle of nowhere. And she said, I have a pop-up tent in the backyard that you can live in. And so I said, okay. And so that's where I lived. And her children coined me the creature that lived out back, which then got shortened down to just the creature. So I was a creature. That was my name to the kids. I am still in contact with all of those children. Well, 3 of the children. The others, I don't really know what they're doing, but 3 of the kids I'm still in touch with. It was very impactful, that part. It was the kind of the start of healing, but at the same time, it was on pretty shaky ground. So it didn't really set well. Well, then
you're living in a tent in a backyard. I mean, that I'm not to diminish what they did in giving you a place. That is awesome and wonderful, and I'm so glad they were there. I'm just saying that doesn't create a stable and life for you and a place. You know, you're not healing yet. You've got to get survival before you can start to thrive.
Right. So I was working 3 jobs, trying to save enough money to get something on my own. And I was working about, I would say, 18 hours a day. And I literally went to the tent and slept. I woke up and I went to work and I was gone all day and I came back. So there wasn't really a whole lot of time. But I ended up moving again. I had saved some money and I had met, oh my God, this is such a tragedy. So, but it's of my own making. This is when Aubrey becomes self-destructive. So
are you saying that Aubrey starts to repeat the destructive patterns that have been already in his life?
Oh,
because he's never been exposed to healthy tools.
Yeah. So
yeah, of course,
I met someone online because there was no meeting someone in where I lived. There was just, it was bad. So, and through all of this, mind you, with every thunderstorm, with everything, I'm like curled up in a ball in bed thinking it's Armageddon and I'm about to croak and stuff. So there's a lot of trauma stuff happening. Really not dating material, okay? Just gonna throw that out there. I had no business even bothering to try this, but I was like, I'm lonely. I would like to share my life with somebody, but I had no idea how to get there. And like I said, I had no business, to be honest. But, live and learn. So I actually met somebody in Fort Wayne. And I ended up moving to Fort Wayne. Well, everything this person told me was a lie, of course. He actually still lived with his mother in a 1-bedroom apartment. And so I moved from the tent to nothing. I was homeless again in Fort Wayne. And I stayed in this little ramshackle motel. It was called the Heart Motel. And believe me, it had hourly rates. So that tells you exactly what it was like.
Oh, yeah. Tells you what you need to know.
Oh, yeah. So I was there, and then I house jumped a half a dozen times, and then I met somebody who was really very kind, and he took me in, and we were together for 3 years before that went to a disastrous end. Because honestly, how could I possibly have any kind of, no. So I needed some restructuring. So after that, and I have no contact with my family, of course. Well, while I was with this fellow for 3 years, it was stable enough that things started to really surface. And this is partly why we didn't stay together because I had quite the breakdown. Because I was finally in this, like I had a place to sleep every night, and the first year went by and there was no hiccups. It was like pretty smooth. So of course, everything's going to come to the surface because that's what happens. And I pretty much lost my marbles, and everything, just all these emotions started coming out. And he was like, whoa, what's this all about? And they put me in the hospital. And they put me on all kinds of psychoactive drugs and things. I was not schizophrenic. I was not bipolar. I was not any of those things. What it was trauma.
Yeah, you were just hurt deeply.
Yeah. And so while it was really strange, while I was in the hospital, because I was there for about a month, they put me on disability. And I never asked to be on disability, but they put me on disability and made my partner at the time the payee of my accounts. And I have no memory of signing anything or whatever. So I was on disability. I got $425 a month, and that was my income. And I stayed that way because I thought there was something wrong with me. So I was taking these drugs, mental health drugs, and going to therapy and stuff. And that was really difficult, because when you take mental health medication but you don't need it, bad things happen.
It creates other issues.
Right. So I started behaving even more weirdly. And he was a truck driver. And so he would be gone all week and he would come home on the weekends. And so I was discharged, and I was taking these medications. It was making me behave very strangely. And I made a friend that I used to hang out with periodically. And one night he came over, and the next thing I know, it's the morning after. And he had raped me.
Mm.
And I realized I had been roofied. And then he disappeared. And I had to explain that to my partner, who didn't believe me, who thought that I was cheating. And I wasn't. So again, we're going back to being invisible. So to have your partner just be like, well, no, you were cheating. And so all of this stuff started to come back again. And we ended up splitting, and then I was homeless again. Pattern of my life. In the dead of winter in Fort Wayne, Indiana. So you know how warm that is. And I ended up in Toledo. Some of this stuff, I don't even know how I ended up doing all this, but I ended up in Toledo, and I was living with this deaf family, because there's a huge deaf population in Toledo. And I grew up with a deaf friend. My mom's best friend's daughter was deaf. So we all had to learn sign language. So I knew quite a bit of sign language. So I could communicate with them. And I was there for a while. And then that went south because they were into drugs. And, like all of my friends were super into drugs. People were doing heroin and stuff sitting right next to me. And I never got into it. I kind of felt like my life was so screwed up as it was, that there was no way that using any of that nonsense was going to make it better. It was just going to make it worse. And I felt so out of control of everything, that being physically out of control of my sensibilities was it was not something I ever was interested in. So I never got into drugs. I smoked pot here and there, but that was really the extent of it. And so then I ended up down in Florida. Oh my God, I've lived everywhere. I ended up down in Florida and got into an unfortunate relationship with an alcoholic that, of course, you know, you go with what you know, who was extremely abusive and liked pushing me through cupboards and stuff. Like it was actually kind of violent. And I was not allowed to leave the house. He would go out and he would come home drunk from a football game or from whatever. And then it just went downhill from there. So I actually escaped that and ended up getting raped again, which is kind of embarrassing to even say once you're that age, because you're like, how old am I? And I'm a guy that I am having. How does a guy like, you resist, right? Well, no, you don't, because of my history of sexual trauma. What happens is I freeze.
Well, yeah, we don't pick out of the fight, flight, freeze response. We don't get to pick which one it is that and you had a history already. There's certainly nothing embarrassing about that. I'm just sorry that happened to you.
It's just it's embarrassing to me because I think I'm 6'5". I'm not a small person, and that element messes with you because you're like, well, if I really didn't want it to happen, I would have stopped it. And then you start doing the victim blame thing, and I'm like, ugh.
Man, you were set up for all this. I mean, there are big strapping men who are abused by their small, tiny wives at times, we were set up. You were set up with a pattern of abuse your whole life. And it's just, I'm just sad that it kept happening to you because, again, we were set up for it. Not only did we attract abusive people, a lot of us, but then we also let them stick around at times because that's all we knew how to do. Your whole life, you're taught, here's this abusive organization that you're living within in an abusive household, and you just have to grin and bear it. You have to take it. You almost feel like you owe something to the abusers.
It's true. It's true.
I mean, it's the whole domestic violence thing. It's if you leave me, no one will ever love you. You can't survive without me. All those kinds of messages that someone would say in a domestic violence situation. Isn't that exactly what Jehovah's Witnesses say? You're nothing without us. You can never be happy without us. Nobody out there can ever love you. It's the same situation. It's just... we were bred for this.
It's true. Well, and the other bit is we're not taught. We're taught that there's no morals in the world, and that the only people who have morality are the witnesses, which is, of course, garbage. And it's just unequivocally untrue.
Mm-hmm.
And I know lots of people now that have plenty of moral fiber.
Yeah.
My partner now, I have the most amazing partner now. I am in such a different place than I was. So that said, my story does have at least a happier ending. I won't say the happiest, but it's got a happier ending.
Sure.
And it's still going. So every day that I improve and whatnot, it just continues to get better. But see, I had no support system. So all of these things continued to happen. And this is what gets really, this is what gives me that visceral reaction against the religion, is because when you discuss this, because at this point, my mother was making contact with me. We were talking a little bit, and I had told her about some of the things that had happened, and she would say, well, what do you expect for being in the world? And there was, I know. And so she says, people out in the world, they don't have the morality. You can't expect them to be honest and truthful and kind and all these others. And I remember telling her, well, I didn't have that experience in the religion either. So please explain to me where we're doing this. And so she was like, you need to come back to the religion, and we can heal all of this. And I'm like, Mother, you perpetuated a lot of this. So what makes you think that staying with you is going to be a good idea? I mean, like, really a good idea. She, and I did, truth told, I did try to go back on 3 occasions. And then a 4th one that was really, that was pretty half-assed. But on 3 occasions that I genuinely was just tired. Like I didn't know. It was like running back to the arms of an abuser.
Yes.
And I was, I didn't have anywhere to go, and I was scared, and I was alone, and I thought maybe I am doing something wrong. Because, this whole thing comes from this young person who was kicked to the wolves at such a young age with no support and no anything, having to figure everything out on their own, not even having a high school diploma. So survival was very challenging. And not having any of those life skills, having to learn that was a pretty steep curve. And and quite frankly, I'm not sure how I survived. I mean, the truth told, but well, here we are. So I did try to go back, and it failed every time because I knew there was something fundamentally wrong with where I was. So I couldn't do it. And because it goes against my nature to do things that are counter my identity. I won't do that anymore. So I moved to Spokane, Washington. I know, all over the place, because, we're trying to find some kind of normalcy somewhere. And first thing I do is I meet an abuser. Not only do I meet an abuser, I married the abuser and was with him for 18 years. Mm. He did not, I will say this about him, he did not intentionally, he has a complicated history too, very complicated. And what's more, he's on the spectrum, the autism, so he has Asperger's. So there are certain elements of his behavior that I understand. I don't excuse, but I understand. And which is why I think I stayed as long as I did. But then there comes a point when your personal safety, I had to get restraining orders. I had to get, it was bad. It was so bad. And he would become violent, not towards me, but he would just become violent. And it was a problem. And he was a sex addict, and he slept with everyone that I could. It was bad. So that was 4 years ago. I divorced him. And during that time that I was with them, my parents had run into some pretty significant hardships. And during my relationship with him, I made some personal discoveries that were really enlightening. I always felt very different. I never felt like I belonged in anything. And remember before I said I was going to tell you something that I've never publicly disclosed. And this is it. I thought my identity was just, I didn't know who I was. I couldn't figure it out. I just
Well,
didn't
sure,
belong
we're
anywhere.
born and given an identity as Jehovah's Witnesses, and then we
Yeah,
lose that identity at some point.
you do.
Yeah.
And there's, in trying to find who I was, I identified this very feminine aspect to myself. And I thought, oh, maybe I'm transgender. Shocking. That would be really something else. I would probably make the ugliest woman on the earth, but hey. So I didn't try that. I didn't go down that path, but I thought about it a lot. And I was like, God, why do I feel like this? Nothing made sense. But I didn't really feel like a woman entirely either. Like, I still felt male too. And I thought, well, that can't be transgender. And this was before the non-binary thing. So I didn't even know what that was all about. That I didn't think that was a thing. I was watching Oprah and I was watching this transgender episode and I thought, oh, wow, that's interesting. And I thought I identified with some of it, but not with all of it. So it was during this time that I decided to make a lot of structural changes in my life. I was with my husband and I got my diploma, my GED. This was in 2003. In July of 2003.
Good for you.
I got my diploma, and my friend is funny. He encouraged me to do it. He said, you really should go to school. He says, you're capable, you're intelligent, you can manage it. And I said, well, what if I fail the test? And he's like, go take it and see. That's the only way you're going to know. So I took it. I scored very well. And they asked me if I was interested in college. That's how well I scored. And I said, actually, I am. And they said, well, the only thing that you are lacking in terms of academics is your math score was a little down. But because you only went through Algebra 1, that makes sense. Math is one of those things that you have to have instruction for it for the most part. So they said, you should go to the local university and apply. So that's what I did. And I got in. And in January, I got my GED in July, and I had my application to the university in September, and I was accepted, and I started school January of 2004. And that was interesting. So at this point, because of the breakdown I had in Fort Wayne, the circuit overseer and the district overseer had given my parents permission to speak to me because of these extenuating circumstances of my mental health and stuff. They felt that, oh my God, I totally skipped over baptism.
Oh, that's okay.
Oh my God. Pause. See, ADD, I'm telling you. So, well, because it's kind of important, because I thought this is what really shifted everything, was the baptism, because I was 15 and I was stuck in this gay thing and I didn't know what I was going to do with this gay thing. And I really believed that if I got baptized, when I came up out of the water, it'd be gone. It would be gone, because that's what there's this, you wash away the old personality, you put on the new personality. What a bunch of rubbish. But anyway, so I got baptized, and my cousin was the one doing the baptizing. So my cousin did it, and he's a missionary in the Dominican. So that tells you, like, my family, how into the religion they are.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's hardcore. So I got baptized, and I came up out of the water, and I was still gay. And my heart just sank. And I was so screwed. I was just so screwed. And it left me so distraught that I went out and I got drunk that night. 15. I went to a Pink Floyd laser light show with a couple of my friends, and I don't even know how we got alcohol, to be honest. But we got alcohol and I got drunk at the laser light show. And then I went to it was at a district convention. And that was that. And when baptism didn't fix anything, that was when I gave up. I knew this was just, well, so this ties into this district overseer and circuit overseer thing. So I had
Can I firstly just say,
yeah,
a district overseer and circuit overseer had to give your parents permission to talk to you when you were hurting. Like, yeah. Just soak that in. That's so screwed up. No, like, what is that about? I mean, I know what it's about because I was one of Jehovah's Witnesses, but for anyone who's listening who was never one of Jehovah's Witnesses, you have to have two people like approve your contact with your own kid. That is so messed up.
Well, and it gets even more messed up because what they were doing is they found out that because the elders didn't want me to get baptized. They were like, no, well, because they had it out for me anyway. So they didn't want me to get baptized. And my dad is the one who said, you have no right to tell him he can or cannot get baptized. And so he pushed for it, which I feel really bad for him because I know he felt guilt about that later because I should never have been baptized.
I feel bad for you for being baptized more than anything.
Yeah. So I got baptized. Everything went down. Fast forward. And so they got special permission because of my mental health at the time and everything. And it turns out I don't have any of those things. I'm fine. I'm perfectly stable. It was therapy and trauma and getting, I had
EMDR.
Yeah, thank you. I had that therapy for years, and it was, not years, that sounds terrible, months. And it really helped a good deal. I don't take any medication now. I'm totally good. As good as I get. Anyway, so they got special permission because the district overseer didn't believe that my baptism was valid. Because, here we come with some convenience. Because of my behavior surrounding the baptism. You know, I was smoking and I was drinking and I was doing all of these unclean things. How could my baptism really have been valid or real? And so for that reason, my parents were allowed to have limited contact with me. Well, when the district overseer changed, they never revisited it. So my parents still talked to me a bit. And I would go and see them and whatever. And my husband would come with me, but we had to sleep in separate bedrooms, whatever. And that was just the way it was. But my parents ran into a lot of hardship because my father was still using, and their money was really bad, and was unaware that they were about to lose their house, and they were going to be homeless. So I had a bit of savings and whatnot, and so I helped get them out of this pickle. No small feat. I became the executor, or not executor, I had power of attorney over their stuff, something my brothers were livid about because I might let them get a blood transfusion if something happened, and all that other stuff. It was just a bunch of disingenuous garbage because they wouldn't step up to help them either. And so I dug them out of the hole. it took a lot of resources and effort, but I got them out of that hole. I got them refinanced. I got them everything. And my mother took over the finances, and they did fine from there on out. But it was a ridiculous amount of money and effort to get them to a stable place. And during that time, I got degrees in chemistry and microbiology. And then I had an internship with a local hospital. I became a medical laboratory scientist. I've worked in infectious disease since then. And then, so I got my own education. I put myself through school. I got no help from anybody. It was just me. And then in 2016, I got a call from my mother. Oh, before that, my father had surgery and he almost died. He would have died if I had not had my infectious disease education. He had developed diabetes because, the man abused his body to no end. So he developed type 2 diabetes, and he had this surgery on his foot, and it wouldn't heal, and it was all wrapped up. And I recognized his symptoms and what was going on, and he was majorly septic. And I was living in Spokane, Washington at the time. So I went over to Idaho, and I took care of my dad for about 3 months, where I was met with some of the most hostile witnesses ever. They would not come and see this is a direct quote from one of the witnesses. I will not go over there and visit them with that boy there. Oh, that boy. Okay. Well, apparently that was the tone for all of them. So I said, fine, I'll leave the house and you can come visit. And my mother can text me or call me when you all leave. And so I was met, even though I was my brothers never showed up, never came, never did anything. They, but I was there. And I was taking control of the situation. And of course, they know what's best. And so anyway, long story short, he recovered. I left. And shortly thereafter, in August of 16, I get a call from my mother. And she said, I can't talk to you anymore. I'm at war with my conscience, at war with my God, and I can't do this. It breaks my heart. You're my favorite child, yada, yada. This is the end. No more conversation. Okay. So I said, I respect your beliefs. I won't contact you. And I didn't. So I moved to Sacramento, which is my home base anyway. It's where I was born and raised. And I just lived my life. And I ended up, 3 months after moving here, I ended up filing for divorce because the behavior just continued and I couldn't live with it anymore. And a while later, I met my current partner, and he's amazing and wonderful and lovely. And something was happening. Oh, my grandmother passed away. And of course, I am not allowed contact with any of them. So I don't know that they're even sick. I don't know that anything is even happening with any of my family members. I also find out that my father's been hospitalized several times. And I'm like, okay, well, so if you're only going to call me with this news, I'm not really, what do you want from me? Well, I'm just letting you know what's going on. Okay. So they were asking about my ex-husband, and I told them that because they weren't aware that I divorced. I said I got divorced, and as soon as I said that, something shifted in their tone, because when in 2016, when I was talking to my mother, she said she insinuated that the only reason they were talking to me was because they had special permission so that they could bring me back. So it was a giant manipulation.
Always manipulation.
And see, there I had to use the word, but that's what it was. And I didn't want to use, because I think manipulation is I don't think it's a good or bad. It's just a
It could
word.
be used again different ways.
Yeah,
but
that's what happened.
They have ulterior motives, and those motives are not in your best interest. It's the whole, and I know you've been out for a long time, but I don't know if you know this or not, but they have a clause basically in the shunning policy that is that if there is, quote, necessary family business, they can reach out to you. What that means is if the Jehovah's Witness needs or wants something from you, they have carte blanche to reach out to you. But of course, if you need something, they'll let you die on the street.
Oh, without question.
Right. So, it is manipulative. It is narcissistic in and of itself. It's all about what they want and bringing you back into what they want. And it's just really sad because you're not, again, you're invisible in some ways because you're not being visibly seen for who you are. And because now they just want to accept you, they even got special permission to talk to you. And we all know why.
Oh, yeah.
It's always in their interests.
Well, it's always in their interest. And my mother, and this will go, so going back a little bit before the divorce, so I was working, like I said, in an infectious disease. And that was, oddly enough, that was coupled with other work with hormones. I'm not sure why we worked with hormones the way we did, but we just did. So we did a lot of estrogen and progesterone and testosterone work. And so anyway, I was going through this process when I was in school. I was evolving and growing into myself. And I still had that weird sense of duality. I really could not figure out what it was. And again, it was Oprah. And I don't even watch Oprah. That's the thing. It's the funny thing. But I was watching this episode of Oprah, and this person was on that was intersex. And I thought, well, isn't that fascinating? So here I am. I work in a lab that does hormones work. So I did my own. And I said, I wonder, just as a one-off kind of thing, as an experiment. I mean, I have a scientific mind, so, process of elimination. So I drew my own blood. Do not do that. And and I tested it. And oh my God. So I'm intersex. I have a lot of hormones that I should not have. So the whole feelings, the whole thing that I was experiencing wasn't that I was transgender. It wasn't that I was non-binary. It was that I was two people. I was like, I'm half boy, half girl, like physiologically even. I have parts that aren't male. Well, no, yes, but I have ovaries. So that's all I have. But the reason I even bring this up is it's important to the story because I have struggled with my identity in my whole life. I didn't fit in with the gay people. I didn't fit in with the straight people. I didn't fit in with the trans people. I didn't fit in with anybody. I didn't fit in with the Jehovah's Witnesses. I fit in with the world, everything outside of the Jehovah's Witnesses, because there was just so much more there. But it was still difficult to find some kind of identifying marker in all of that. So I was just me. And for the longest time, I went without a last name. I just went by Aubrey. Aubrey, oddly enough, I was given a name that actually can go either direction, and it fit with my physiology. And so that's what I stuck with, and I stayed with Aubrey. And so now that I know who I am, I shared that with my parents. And I said, so I don't really know if it's anecdotal, it doesn't really matter, but am I gay? So who knows, is my orientation from the female part of me? Is it from the male part of me? Is it from, how does this all go together? Well, frankly, none of it matters.
It doesn't matter.
No, I am who I am. I'm a person on this earth that happens to have a little extra. So I explained that to them, and they took it very well. And they were like, oh, that's whatever. It's just a thing. But it comes up later when my mom asks me to come back after she knows and stuff. And she's like, why won't you come back? And I said, Mom, who do you want me to be? What do you mean? And it's, well, do you want me to be Aubrey him, or do you want me to be Aubrey her? You are asking someone who doesn't fit in any mold that you possess to be in a mold that I can't do.
How does her book deal with that?
Well, that's what I asked her. I said, there's all kinds of things about, this, that, and the other, but where do I fit in this? So once again, it's this isolation. It's this common thread throughout my life of this isolation, of this singularity. And she's like, well, I don't know. And I said, no, that's not an answer. Who do you want me to be? Well, of course, her response is, everybody knows you as a guy. So we want you, that's how you would present. But then I can't have any romantic involvement. So I have to be, oh yes, but God will heal you in the new world. And I said, Mom, you are implying that there is something wrong with me. I said, by your own belief system, does God not create everything? And she said, yes, but we are burdened with imperfection. And I said, so you're saying that this is a flaw? How can you say that? It doesn't make any sense to me. So she wanted me to present as boy and live that life. But as such, I could not have a partner of any kind. Now, if I presented as a woman, which biologically I also am, what do you do? So I already have had numerous physicians try to get me to choose what gender I want to be. And I said, I don't need to. I'm me. And I'm happy with that. And I don't want anything removed. I don't want anything altered. My body has existed like this for as long as, however old I was at the time. And now I'm 47 and I'm not changing anything. It's been like this for long enough.
You shouldn't change anything. You are you. Isn't this, I'm chomping at the bit because scientifically, this is science. You have both male and female.
Mm-hmm.
And they can't speak to that because they need things to be binary so that they can moralize and so that they can judge. Right or wrong, good or bad, male and female, righteous and unrighteous. They need labels so that they can judge. You are like this perfect example of something that that shows how screwed up their moralization of everything is. Even, sexuality, gender, all of this. You are just you, and it doesn't matter. And maybe one of the reasons that you've always felt invisible, in addition to all of these narcissistic people who can't see you anyway, in addition to a culture at large outside of Jehovah's Witnesses that likes labels and tidy little neat boxes to put people into, you were invisible to you. You now know, and you now can understand. And so I hope that telling your story here, you know, even just to me right now, you know, you don't know me, you know, kind of a stranger, I guess. I hope that you can feel seen, because like, you're you and uniquely yourself, and that's all that matters. And so you are visible, maybe for the first time, just being yourself. You're saying, hey, this is me, I'm intersex, okay, but you're also just you. Like, it doesn't even matter really to me. It doesn't matter at all. But I wonder, you know, you just always feeling different, maybe this helps you to feel a little more visible to yourself. And maybe it could help you to walk through the world a little differently too, because you know yourself even better. You know some certain things that have always made you feel a little different. And so what if you are? At least you can see that now.
Yeah, I mean, I have long since accepted my identity and appreciate the unique qualities that embodies. But, you know, there's always that element, you know, that of, I just don't belong anywhere. And, but it's okay. I don't find that, I don't find sadness, the level of sadness in that I used to. It's okay. Everything is fine. The world is going to continue to turn. The sun is going to continue to burn, and we are going to be who we are. You know, the Bible is the Bible. It says what it says. It says that God created animals, male and female, according to their kind. Oh, is that a fact?
True?
Is that a fact? I guarantee you, I am not the first, you know, in the whole of history to say. And, you know, one of the things my mother said is that our imperfection is becoming so profound because of how long it's been since creation. And I said, well, you might consider this an imperfection, but I don't. I consider it just part of biology. You know, that's what I studied in school. That's what I've come to know. That's how I even was able to identify what I was able to identify about myself.
Doesn't it I may be speaking out of term, but doesn't intersex exist inside
Everywhere.
the animal kingdom as well?
Yes.
When did the animals sin?
Well, you are preaching to the choir when it comes to that concept. Yeah. I've brought that up too. You know, I'm like, there's amphibians and fish, and I have a reef tank at home, and I have clownfish that change genders.
Yes.
All the time.
Yes.
I mean, it's a natural thing for them. That's what they do. If I have 3 females, one of them becomes male. Other way around too. If I have all males, 2 of them become female. Only one male, always. So no. And I used to have a chicken growing up. I had a chicken, a Rhode Island Red, and her name was Molly, and she was hermaphrodite. She would lay eggs, but she also mounted chickens, and she had a rooster comb. So, you know, it exists everywhere. To say that it is an imperfection or that it is unnatural is I think, the egregious sin.
Oh, it is 100%. And
yeah,
it's that rhetoric that others, I mean, I can't speak for how you feel inside of yourself.
Yeah.
But perhaps it is the environment around you that is what causes a lot of that, because a lot of the feeling of other or invisible.
Mm.
I don't know. I wish you I don't know. I think that, again, maybe you just haven't had the right accepting people around you in your life.
I'm getting there. I have a lot of, so the biggest,
And then accepting yourself helps as well.
yeah, well, and that's where you have to start, really.
Yes.
Before you can let anybody else, you have to deal
Absolutely.
with yourself. And I do accept myself. I don't have near the stigma on my own identity that I used to. And there are lingering things that are difficult to cope with.
Sure.
But I think, I'm in such a different place. I'm no longer in abusive relationships. I'm no longer saddled with the anxiety that I used to have, and I'm very comfortable in who I am. I don't worry about any of that stuff. I'm actually, with the irony, I'm actually very much an atheist, and I became an atheist in college because I could see how God is a construct. And if there is a God, it is not what we think that God is. So I think at best I'm agnostic, and at most I'm atheist. But it doesn't change, none of it, no matter what my belief system, it doesn't change who I am. It doesn't change how I'm going to be. I try to be kind. I try to be decent. I don't, like I said, I have an aversion to dishonesty. It really, I just identify the isolation of the human condition, how we are all these individuals wandering this planet, blind as bats, trying to figure it out and doing the best we can with what we have. It's why I don't feel a level of animosity towards those who have shunned me. That's their choice. That's what, I can't change their viewpoint. Does it make me sad? Yes, of course. I love my mother. I would love to have her in my life. But I'm not going to allow that level of destructive influence anywhere near me. No, it's just not going to happen. So,
because you love yourself too.
Yes. Well, that's where you have to start. That's where it all happens. You stop being angry at people. You stop being malicious, or not malicious, but just you stop being hateful. You stop all of it. It goes away when you look at yourself and say, you're all right. Not perfect, got flaws, lots of them, but you do the best you can. And you treat people with dignity, and you treat yourself with dignity and with grace. And I started waking up every morning, and it sounds so cheesy, but it really does help. And I rattle off 5 things, and I make it sound really easy, but it wasn't at first. At first, it was genuinely work. But I rattle off 5 things that I am genuinely grateful for.
Yeah, it's gratitude practice.
It just changes the way your dynamic is. So now, instead of automatically going to this place of disparity and isolation, I go to connectivity and grace. Like, I have a beautiful partner. I have the most amazing dog ever. My little Hamilton. He's an Australian Shepherd, and he is absolutely one of the greatest loves of my life. And I'm blessed with so many things. I had to work for every ounce of it. I had to go through some pretty ugly things to get here. But I got here. And that is the part that means the most. They always say it's not the journey. What is it? Not the journey. It's the destination. No, it's not the
It's not
destination.
the destination. It's the journey.
Yeah. Well, my journey was pretty hellish. But as it stands now, I'm in a place I've never been before, consistently. I mean, I've always had windows into this, but never like a day to day, where if something, you can only control you, and you can only control your own thoughts and your own experiences. You can't make people do things. You can't make people see your points of view, your perspective. You share your thoughts, and you have to leave them out in the universe, and that's where they sit. So that's what I do now, and I'm a much more settled person. I don't have I have an identity. I still have a tremendous amount of sadness for the things that I have lost and I will continue to lose. I did not get to see my father before he died. So I've had to reconcile that whole experience and having to be there with my mother and feel that alienation still. It stings, but it's a different kind of sting. It doesn't touch my core anymore. It's more surface. So it's not an unhealthy kind of cocooning away of your emotions. It's just a natural shielding, shall we say, of what you will allow to cause you harm and what you won't. The elders spoke to me when I was with my mother after my father passed, and they had asked me if I would be interested in coming back. And I said, even if you had the truth, which I don't believe you do, which of course they love hearing that, I would not come back to you people. And they were like, of course, they don't understand that in the slightest. And I said, because I would not want to spend eternity with you people. You are sick. You are a malignancy. And I won't associate myself with that level of negativity. And they were like, but you have to acknowledge that, there's God. And I said, no, I don't. I said, I am an atheist. And as Reagan says, I'm an unabashed atheist, not afraid of burning in hell. And they actually said this to me. They said to me, well, I don't believe you are an atheist.
And so damn arrogant. Wow. That's the narcissism. I can't see you.
Yeah. They said, well, I don't believe you're atheist. You can't be in biology the way you are and not see God every day. And that was when I became a little less friendly. And I said, don't you ever think that you can tell me what I believe and what I don't believe. You don't have the right to make that statement. And I don't ever want to hear those words come out of your mouth in my presence again. I may have to have dealings with my mother in the future, but you will not be part of that. I said, you have your rules. I don't have to live with those. Those aren't my rules. Those are your rules. So if your arrogant presumption thinks that I'm going to subject myself to your rules, then you're really going to be in for a surprise, because I do what I want and you're not what I want. And that was the end. And then a few days later, my mom sent me a text that said, "Thanks for coming." Yeah, so she cut me off via text. "Thank you for everything you did." And she genuinely was heartbroken. I mean, I don't want it to sound like there was no emotion. She was hurting saying these things to me. And but she said, "I can't be in contact with you." And I never responded. And I won't. I'm done.
Yeah, I'm glad. Aubrey, so a couple things there. One is, a lot of people have had families say things like, well, it's the truth. I know it's the truth. And it's that denial that they live in as Jehovah's Witnesses, that there could be anything else. They need this to be true. They've invested so much into it. But also, look, I shunned my own brother. He left or was disfellowshipped at like 22, I think. I'm bad with the ages. We didn't do birthdays, right? But it hurt me to shun him. It did. And I watched my mom hurt to shun him. Okay. But the only thing we thought of in that pain was ourselves. I remember to this day the moment 10, 12 years later when I was reading a book because I knew something was wrong. I was starting to get more mentally and emotionally healthy. And it hit me. Holy shit. What have I done to him? What has he been feeling for these past 10, 12 years? I was so caught up in that narcissistic inability to see other people. I was so caught up. It had never struck me. Dear God, this kid had his entire family, his job, everything ripped from him at 22 years old with nowhere to go. Like, everybody abandoned him. And we never even considered his feelings because we were all blind and deaf to them. That's part of the indoctrination. It's part of the brainwashing. I never even thought, and when it hit me, as I was finally waking up emotionally, it crushed me that I had done that to somebody else, that I had hurt someone, that I had been so awful in that way, because I realized that the emotional extortion that I had put upon him, playing part of that game. Now, I was able to forgive myself for that. I realized that I only did it. This was the only way that I knew. He forgave me for that because, again, he said, "Hey, I know where we come from, right?" But lost in all of this, it gets back to the invisibility. It just, being one of Jehovah's Witnesses just is this absolute sensory deprivation when it comes to being able to see or hear or feel or validate anyone whose experience is different than ours when we're in that place. And so you have felt invisible and you have come by this honestly. And I'm sorry, because your mom does care for you, I'm sure, but it can't be real love, because real love goes beyond those bounds and loves a person for who they are and is not blind to who they are and can hear and feel them. And they just don't have that ability. It gets cut off at a point. You can call it love, care, whatever. It gets to a point where it runs up against doctrine or that blindness, and they just don't have it to give. They don't have that program. They lack empathy. They can't put themselves in your shoes. They can't see you, feel you, hear you. That program doesn't exist. And I was without that program myself for a long, long time. And so I am so sorry, because you have been subjected to all of this. And, this overarching feeling of invisibility is something you come by so honestly, because that's just what it is.
Yeah, that's
And I'm
exactly what
sorry.
it is. Oh, thank you. But I don't, it would, I wouldn't be who I am. And I have to,
Absolutely.
and I have to appreciate that as well.
Sure.
So there's nothing I can do to change it.
No,
So you just embrace it and you say, you make your peace
and you
and
grieve
you
it.
acknowledge the level to which it's awful
Mhm.
and don't shove it under the rug
Mhm.
and but don't let it consume you either. Keep it in its place. It's
No.
just an element. And you live your life by your own moral code, not by some fabrication. And, just don't be an asshole. That's really honestly, that's how I live my life. Like, I just try not to be an asshole. I try to show empathy. I try to be a good friend. I try to be the best partner I can be. And that's all anybody can ask.
Yeah, that's why I end every episode with love yourself and others, do no harm, and go be happy. Just don't be an asshole. Don't hurt other people. Don't be an asshole to yourself either. You
No.
know, and
Yeah.
learning to love ourselves and others is a wonderful thing to be able to do. To love ourselves for our whole selves and to not have a stopping point at which we become blind or turn that off. So I'm so glad for you that you've been able to find all of this. I'm sorry it had to come in these ways, but that is, again, part of it. Acceptance means letting go of the hope that things could be different. They can't be, because even your parents, they're doing the best that they could. Everyone has positive intent. Most people there aren't being malicious. They're
Right.
just, this is what they've got to offer. And it sometimes it's not enough, and it hurts. But it doesn't mean that there's a negative intent in why they're being a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just glad that you have been able to, because at the end of the day, this is your story. It involves all these people, but it's your story. And I'm glad that you've been able to do some healing, to literally find yourself in some ways. And that you have some people around you, like your partner and your dog, and I hope some friends or whatever the
Oh,
case may be, who accept you and love you just for who you are, and they don't need you to be anybody else, or don't even care about certain things. I don't care if someone's gay or what their gender is, or it doesn't matter. I mean, I'm happy for them that they are who they are, and that's the only way in which it matters. So I'm just so glad that you get to be yourself now.
yeah. Yeah, I'm glad for that too. No, it's yeah, mostly that's where it boils down to is accepting yourself and
Yeah,
walking through life with that acceptance and not letting anybody take it from you.
yeah.
And if you're going to shun something, shun people that are trying to steal your identity and who are trying to make you into something that you are not, and who want you to be contrary to your nature. Because I refuse to believe that there is any entity out there that wants us to be less than who we are.
Yeah. Well, I think that's all beautifully said. Do you have anything that you are hoping to do in the future with your life? I mean, I know or that you enjoy about today. You've got this, I know you went to a concert yesterday, right? So you get to enjoy music probably on a different level now.
Yeah, well, my musical appreciation has definitely deepened over time. Um, but I think mostly, if for anybody who's listening, there are certain people that I had in my life growing up that were always there, that they didn't understand what I was going through exactly, but they were there anyway. I had, as just a brief, I had two friends. It was very sweet, slightly cheesy, but it was very sweet. I was in a very dark place, and they sat on each side of me, and they sang Kate Bush's "Don't Give Up" to me. It actually made me laugh in the moment because of how kind of ridiculous it was. But I think back on that now, and it was really there was such a depth of kindness
Oh,
in
that's
that.
sweet. Yeah.
And they had no idea what I was going through, but they just knew that something was happening. So, and I've always had these pivotal people here and there and everywhere that just kind of made it tolerable, made it something I feel like I could manage.
They supported you.
And yeah, after a fashion, and they had
In
plenty of
some
their
way.
own issues.
Sure.
So I'm very grateful for them. I know that they will listen to this because I told them about this, and they were very, they don't know the depth of all of this, so they're going to be in for a little bit of this, as anybody who knows me, who hears this, a lot of it is going to be maybe a little shocking. So I hope that it's okay, but if it's not okay, that's okay too. This is who I am. This is how I've had to survive and now thrive. And my future isn't going to be going backwards. It's not going to be living with all of this nonsense. It's going to be putting, like I said in the letter I wrote you, it's putting one foot in front of the next, hoping for the best, and doing the best I can.
Well, it kind of gets to that, was it the Dr. Seuss quotes, be who you are and say what you feel, because those who mind don't matter and those who matter don't mind.
Correct.
Or something to that extent. I think I said that correctly. Then getting twisted in my head. But, at the end of the day, those who matter to you, they're not going to mind. They're going to love you for who you are and appreciate you for who you are. And those who mind, well, they don't matter so much. Let them. Mm-hmm. There's 8 billion people on this planet. There are plenty of people who will love you for you.
I agree.
Absolutely. Well, and I'm glad that you do as well. So thank you for, telling your story and putting this out there. It's brave to, do so for the first time. You've held this, a lot of this stuff for 30 years, you said. So, I'm glad that you're putting it out there publicly, and I hope it's just another step in the process of you being you and being free to be who you are unabashedly.
Unabashedly. You bet. Thank you for giving me a platform. I appreciate it.